In the late hours of May 27, 2019, tragedy would befall a major metropolitan region as a violent low-end EF4 tornado would rip through Dayton and surrounding areas. The tornado itself was a part of the May 2019 tornado outbreak sequence, a 2-week long event that would produce 400 tornadoes in total. For over 30 minutes, this tornado would raise hell through Brookville, Trotwood, Dayton, and Riverside, along with bringing sadness and despair to the 196,000 people living in these cities. The tornado traveled for over 30 kilometers, had a peak width of almost a kilometer, and produced maximum wind speeds of over 270 kilometers per hour, cementing itself as a titan in Ohio's tornadic history. The tornado would be one of many that made the May 2019 tornado outbreak sequence one of the most prolific tornado outbreak sequences of the decade because of what it did and how many tornadoes it had produced. So today, we're going to talk about it. This is the 2019 Dayton tornado. I hope you enjoy. The day that the Dayton tornado hit was pretty nutty, mainly due to the tornadic activity that took place that day. In the early morning hours of May 27th, a mid-level westerly flow would move over the Midwest. As it was doing so, the SPC would issue an enhanced risk of severe weather at 2 a.m. Eastern Time, which included a 10% risk of tornadoes in the northern region of Illinois. 7 hours later, at 9 a.m. Eastern Time, the SPC would upgrade the outlook, which included a tornado, wind, and hail risk. The following is what it looked like. A 2 to 5% risk of tornadoes was present in states such as Missouri, Iowa, Wisconsin, Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio. Looking deeper into northern Illinois, the risk of tornadoes remained at 10%. However, now the possibility of significant tornadoes was included. A lesser threat of tornadoes was present slightly west, as a prominent upper-level trough was expected to shift east-northeastward from the Four Corners region into the High Plains. The tornado risk here was at 2% in Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, and New Mexico, and 2 to 5% in small portions of Nebraska, Wyoming, and Colorado. The wind risk for the outlook was, relatively speaking, pretty similar to the tornado risk in terms of affected locations, only it covered a significantly larger area of the United States. States such as Nebraska, Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio had a 15 to 30% risk of damaging winds exceeding 50 knots, whereas the probability in states like Texas, Oklahoma, and most of Kansas was at 5%. The hail risk was pretty similar to the wind risk in terms of location. Pretty much all states that had a 15 to 30% risk of damaging winds also had a 15 to 30% risk of receiving 1-inch hail or greater. Additionally, small regions of Nebraska, Colorado, and Wyoming had a 10% risk of receiving 2-inch hail or greater. Tornadic activity prior to the events in Dayton began early in the day, with the first confirmed tornado being an EF1 in Byers, Kansas at 12 a.m. Central Time, and the first significant tornado being an EF3 in Cantrell, Iowa at 1:25 p.m. Central Time. As the day would go on, multiple significant tornadoes would touch down prior to the Dayton tornado, particularly in Indiana and Ohio. In these two states alone, 6 significant tornadoes would touch down in between the Cantrell and Dayton tornadoes, with 4 in Indiana and 2 in Ohio. As storms crossed into Ohio, tornadic activity was expected to lessen after dark. However, with very high CAPE, effective shear and helicity, along with the intensification of activity as several supercells spread across the state, this didn't seem like a very favorable outcome. At this point, it was likely that some devastating tornadoes would impact Ohio. And as we all know, with hindsight being what it is, that is what ultimately would happen. Right before the Dayton tornado touched down, NWS Wilmington's Weather Forecast Office would issue a tornado warning. This warning would be for a thunderstorm with radar-indicated rotation over northeastern Preble and Montgomery counties. 10 minutes after this warning was issued, though, the tornado would touch down. At 10:41 p.m. Eastern Time, the Dayton tornado touched down just west of Brookville. Here, it would produce minor EF0 damage to trees along North Sulphur Springs Road. Moving due east, the tornado would officially enter Brookville, and as it would do so, it would rapidly intensify to high-end EF2 strength. As the tornado continued moving through the city, numerous homes would sustain significant damage. Roofs were torn off, garages were damaged, and exterior walls would collapse. A wastewater treatment plant would also be badly damaged. Brookville High School, one of the largest buildings to be hit by the tornado in Brookville, would have much of its roof torn off. After this, the tornado would continue ripping through the city, downing many trees and power lines, as well as leveling a small automotive business. As the tornado tracked across southern Brookville, a pronounced hook echo and debris ball were showing up on radar. The tornado would eventually move past Brookville, and as it was doing so, it would severely damage multiple homes in less populated areas east of town. Continuing to move in an easterly direction, the tornado would then charge towards its second target, Trotwood. As the tornado entered Trotwood, it would begin traveling along a more southeasterly trajectory. After it would slightly shift its course, it would intensify to EF3 strength and begin striking populated residential areas, taking out numerous homes and apartments. The homes that would come face to face with the tornado would be severely damaged or outright destroyed, with many well-built homes either sustaining the loss of exterior walls, the loss of their roof, or both. The apartments that faced the wrath of the tornado were also severely damaged. Additionally, tree damage in the city was severe, with many being completely snapped or heavily damaged. Finally, the tornado would reach the eastern part of Trotwood and leave town. However, before it did so, it would intensify to high-end EF3 strength and impact that region. After it left Trotwood, it would continue moving in a southeasterly direction to raise hell on its next target. And that target would be Dayton, the largest and the most populated city that was hit by this monster. By the time that the tornado had entered the Dayton city limits, the situation at hand was dire, to put it nicely. To begin with, it maintained its high-end EF3 intensity when entering the city, as well as keeping its southeasterly trajectory. Additionally, the NWS and Montgomery County had issued a PDS warning for tornadoes, as well as a tornado emergency for the county, both of which were issued about 15 minutes after the initial touchdown of the tornado. Shit was about to hit the fan, and people knew it. And once the tornado had entered the city, people's worst fears would become a reality. The first location that the tornado had ransacked was Shiloh. It would enter the neighborhood at high-end EF3 strength, and widespread devastation would occur within the vicinity of Shiloh Springs Road, Turner Road, Chute Mill Road, and North Main Street. In this area, multiple restaurants, self-storage units, a tobacco shop, and numerous other small businesses would either be damaged or outright destroyed. A significant car dealership, Evans Arena, suffered a significant financial loss due to over 200 cars being damaged or destroyed. On the non-business side of things, dozens of homes would see the grim fate that the businesses before them had seen, being severely damaged or outright destroyed. After this point, the true ferocity of the tornado would be shown, as it would finally reach its peak intensity. As it passed south of Frederick Pike and moved along Riverside Drive, it would intensify to EF4 strength. The Foxton apartments were significantly damaged, and the River's Edge apartments were utterly decimated. Many of the well-built brick apartment buildings within this region had their roofs and exterior walls completely removed, along with the destruction of their upper floors, indicating that they were hit with wind speeds of over 270 kilometers per hour. Slightly east, in between the two apartment complexes, a wooded area by Stillwater River is believed to be the site of the most intense wind speeds of the tornado. Here, many hardwood trees were mowed down and debarked. Any that were still standing were stripped of their limbs and bark, with only the largest branches not being completely nubbed down to the trunk. Similarly to the apartment complexes, this wooded area was also hit by wind speeds of over 270 kilometers per hour. After all of that, the tornado would finally begin to weaken. However, it wouldn't be by much, as it would only decrease to high-end EF3 intensity as it passed north of downtown Dayton and moved into Northridge. Along North Dixie Drive and Wagner Ford Road, the tornado would produce widespread destruction as hotels, churches, gas stations, industrial buildings, and additional homes and businesses were either severely damaged or outright destroyed. The notable buildings hit by the tornado within this area would be the North Plaza Shopping Center, a small used car dealership, and a nearby strip club. God fucking bless it. The North Plaza Shopping Center was completely destroyed, as multiple portions of the structure had completely collapsed. As for the other two buildings, the car dealership was leveled, and the strip club was destroyed. After ripping up North Dixie Drive, the tornado would cross Interstate 75 and target Grafton Kennedy Elementary School, located on Wagner Ford Road. The school lost its roof, multiple exterior walls, and several trees within the area, with the trees either being snapped, denuded, or both. With the tornado finally leaving Northridge, it would enter Old North Dayton, continuing to move in the southeast direction and maintaining its EF3 intensity. It would strike multiple businesses and homes, with the Dayton Phoenix Group and Frito-Lay distribution warehouse being largely destroyed. Many industrial vehicles, semi-trailers, and delivery trucks in this area were thrown around like rag dolls and tossed atop one another. Additionally, several very large metal storage tanks were heavily damaged due to getting crumbled. After the tornado had finished its job here, it began to weaken again as it started moving along Brant Pike and Valley Street, passing just northeast of Dayton Children's Hospital. As it was moving along these two roads, it would produce a mixture of EF1 and EF2 damage to many homes, with several having their garages destroyed. A historical location on Valley Street, the Amber Rose restaurant, was hit by the tornado, having sustained damage to its roof and windows. After the restaurant was hit, the tornado crossed State Route 4 and hit the Action Sports Complex at EF2 strength, badly damaging a large metal building at the location. After leaving the Action Sports Complex, the tornado crossed the Mad River and entered Springfield, where it would produce significant damage. It passed through Springfield Street at EF2 strength, inflicting major structural damage on industrial buildings and warehouses, blowing over metal truss transmission towers, scattering debris all across the area, and moving/damaging many vehicles and semi-trailers. Continuing southeast, the tornado would weaken to EF1 strength as it passed through various residential areas of East Dayton. Here, it would damage trees, power lines, and roofs of homes. And after this moment, the tornado would finally leave Dayton, emotionally scarring the living hell out of the 140,000 people living there at the time. But while it had finally left Dayton after wreaking so much havoc on the residents and businesses there, the tornado wasn't done. It had one final target, and that target was Riverside. By the time that the tornado had entered town, it had significantly weakened to EF1 intensity, as well as dramatically shrinking in size, becoming merely a shell of what it was when it ripped through Dayton. After entering Riverside, it hit multiple buildings and produced significant tree and roof damage. The Overlook Mutual Homes complex experienced significant damage, as multiple duplexes had portions of their roofs torn off. The tornado would continue southeast for a bit after hitting the Overlook duplexes, eventually arriving at the Colonial Village apartments. While there, it would blow off the roofing and brick facade of several apartment buildings. This was the last point of damage for the tornado, and at 11:13 p.m. Eastern Time, the tornado would finally lift and dissipate along Burkhart Road. When everything was said and done, the Dayton tornado had traveled 32.2 kilometers, attained a peak diameter of about 965 meters, traveled on the ground for 32 minutes, moved at an average forward speed of 60.3 kilometers per hour, and reached maximum wind speeds of roughly 274 kilometers per hour, giving the tornado a final rating of EF4. After everything that people had been put through, it was now all over, and the people from Brookville to Riverside could finally breathe a sigh of relief. While the tornado was gone, though, the emotional scars weren't, and for many, they would never leave. The damage that this tornado produced was grim, to put it lightly. Houses destroyed, businesses gone, and jobs lost. The list goes on. In Trotwood alone, 500 homes were damaged and 59 were destroyed. 4 people were hospitalized, and an additional 30 who didn't have access to breathable air or medications as a result of the tornado were transported elsewhere. For the Evans Arena car dealership in Dayton, 50 cars were damaged and 154 were completely totaled. All in all, total damage produced by the tornado was estimated at $500 million, although some sources report $550 million. When it came to casualties, 166 people were injured, and shockingly, only one direct death occurred. The likely reason for this is because most people, especially in Dayton, took the warnings issued by the SPC seriously, taking shelter well before the tornado had ripped through the city. Regarding the death that was reported from the tornado, the woman was ruled to have perished in part due to her injuries from the tornado. While she was trapped in her home that was destroyed by this beast, it should be noted that she was 86 years old and was in poor health at the time. Additionally, she died on September 1st of 2019, 97 days after the tornado had hit. Perhaps her poor health leading up to May 27th, and the fact that she died over 3 months after the events that took place that day, contributed to an indirect ruling. But honestly, who knows? An interesting thing about the tornado that I didn't mention earlier is the rating itself. Originally, the tornado had received an EF3 rating with maximum wind speeds of 225 to 240 kilometers per hour. However, this would change a few days later from a follow-up damage survey from the NWS and many others. Remember the damage produced along Riverside Drive and Stillwater River? The follow-up survey found that the complete and roof exterior wall removal from the apartment buildings was enough to be taken out by wind speeds of roughly 274 kilometers per hour. This wind speed estimate was supported by the tree damage near Stillwater River, where trees had experienced debarking and nubbing down to the trunk, things that were caused by wind speeds of, you guessed it, roughly 274 kilometers per hour. This was ultimately the damage that would warrant the upgrade to an EF4 rating. The reason it was likely missed was because the area of EF4 damage was rather small, meaning it simply could have been looked over in the original survey. Additionally, the apartments that sustained EF4 damage weren't leveled in typical EF4 fashion, and the only reason they were determined to have such extreme wind speeds hitting them was because they were well-built structures, meaning that they would have had to receive significantly more force than a normal building to have been taken out in the way that they were. Along with the newly found EF4 damage along Riverside Drive and Stillwater River, more severe EF3 damage than what was initially thought was also found, with areas along Shiloh Springs Road, Westbrook Road, Turner Road, and the Riverside/Stillwater River area being determined to have experienced winds ranging from 240 to 265 kilometers per hour. On May 27, 2019, a nighttime tornado would rip through 4 cities of Ohio, inflicting the most pain onto Dayton. The tornado produced maximum wind speeds of over 270 kilometers per hour, injured 166 people, and indirectly killed 1. This tornado became the first violent tornado to hit Ohio since the 2010 Wood-Ottawa EF4, a tornado that produced maximum wind speeds of over 280 kilometers per hour, injured 28 people, and killed 7. The 2019 Dayton EF4 is a titan in Ohio's tornadic history and is also a strong reminder that no matter where you are, whether it be a rural area or densely populated city, a tornado can hit anywhere, even violent ones. This was a deep dive into the 2019 Dayton EF4. Thank you for watching.